2002 is a year I remember fondly. GameCube was only a year old, and Star Fox Adventures was on the horizon, coinciding with the end of Rareware on Nintendo. At this point, Babbage's was my vague knowledge of retro gaming, and the pre-owned section of EB Games. The place was thriving, as they were both located around the corner from each other. I'd recently finished my first playthrough of Ocarina of Time, which conditioned me into a gamer, and now seeking Majora's Mask, as well as looking for options to purchase my first GameCube. Now that I call back, I'm amazed that my immature psyche could not thrive in having such easy access to what raised me in the prior decade. Like the board game wall of Target being my knowledge of tabletop gaming, just down the corridor, I had no clue how the influence of the empowered and the transitional era were phasing out. Though this knowledge of the retro scene is limited, it's no less remaining prevalent in shaping my adaptation to ever-growing line of mechanics. It is particular to think that everyone was progressing into the refining era with no respect for what got us here, much in comparison to an additional point upcoming later in this video. The hard fact is that I had no comprehension for the value of Babbage's being here and accessible. It closed with the evolution of the 6th generation, now capitalizing by the build of what formed from the impact of the PS1 audience. I felt hurt, the hurt and loss of the abandoning 90s scene, and I'm ashamed of going with the flow, despite no regrets with the Indestructicube. What is an equally hurtful loss is the closing of our lone archaic game store. It would not be for 7 years till this retro market would return, in the form of a new local museum. The savior arrived with a huge welcome as it dethroned the internet as the sole proprietor. GenX Games opened humbly but devotionally, meeting every gamer demographic for each era from conception to transcendent. Everything in effect of my intro to gaming returned in the form of retro, expanding the ever-growing knowledge of before my time. GenX Games became the historical gateway through its selection, and especially by its family-owned residents. Upon opening, it brought together every citizen in town who possessed a different part of the pre-owned scene, in both hardware and software. With so much in common, the draw of gamers met up and spread the flare of this electronic sanctuary. The hardware came down from the attics, regenerating the buzz through the gaming business. Word traveled about tournaments, game rentals, and the policy of try it here before playing it there. The pain of losing this game scene back in '03 finally convalesced with a far superior successor. This is what we needed without realization. GenX with its super selection built from the local audience of the entire county. That's right, the stock came from trade-ins by a town who seemed drained of any favor. There was no competition, let alone a comparable business within the entire region. But this place returned the consoles, games, and the love of mature gamers to a retroactive cognition. My friend and owner truly knew the market. With so much experience and passion and skill set, he developed the store with devoted followers. Many of my elder gaming peers wished such a place existed during their childhood. An example, I witnessed many bring their kids on site to educate on the scene from the age before HD. The owner backed them up with his own perspective and recommendations for the best each era offered. Being a dad, he extended the influence to new gamers by access to the archaic consoles. Multiple kids prioritized GenX where they could use their hard-earned allowance from a humble family-oriented one-stop game shop. Here, children received the first-hand build of gaming know-how, comparable to building a skill set from mechanics. Where they could not get a full experience from watching online, they opted for $3 to play it out in shop. Parents dropped them off while running errands, but also exposed them to first-hand gaming from the higher-ups. I admit, Prior and post-scene, this town had little to do on the retail side, but I would go here for the environment and the interaction. Unlike the next, the screens here brought us together. Heck, I felt withdrawals every time I come from town without a drop-by. Its advent felt completely spontaneous, like a beloved gray box topping out the medium a decade prior. As I mentioned in my nicknaming Generations video, link in the description, I have no idea what will be the primary theme of the 9th generation, just as I could not predict the future scene of GenX Games. 2013 hits hard, drawing near to the release of the PS4 and the Xbox One. I saw at firsthand how all sold their current setup from controller to console, in big anticipation for the onset of Generation 8. Sony pushes forward with the full gamut of features and specs, while Microsoft elaborates every non-gaming capability of its all-in-one machine. A new mindset was initiating, jump-starting in the lead up to the holiday season. There's no comparative to a year's end by the introduction of the next era. So many struggle to keep up. In the back, each of the 360 consoles remained prepped for the next game test, the next tournament, which fell from attendance and interest. The retro demand maintained its strength, whilst the craving for the big three libraries dwindled with the arrival of their successors. A demand this retro-oriented store yearned to meet. This is when I took notice before we could only credit the impact of this family and their cause. Gen X remained on its esoteric level while the illusionary era climbed in irrelevancy. Personally, there's only a select number of high-quality games from the PS4 I favor, a number still below my love for that of its predecessor. Mark and his cause arrived when we needed it, at the start of the first HD generation, in a town where the young aspiring gamers needed an alternative option, in the form of a family-run establishment who prioritized its people. This is what we have here, so nostalgically treasured in memory, the spot that always called us back for the newest ultra-rare trade-in. I admit, as the individual I am, visitation is my definitive purpose for video game stores. I do not seek a specific item, whether game or memorabilia. I find these locations for expanding and developing passion from when I handled my first controller. This is a mechanic of having a sanctuary to express your savvy and interact with that of your peers, a fact without alteration by this closure. I could not value this in 2002, nor could I when the experience returned at the decade's end. What matters are the benefit of this dominating medium forming through what we made here, through every experience point gained. I'm shameful for the kids who only know of this by recalls of their parents, adding another blessing to have been part of this exclusively. For all who live in the outlands with local gaming stores, treasure these establishments as we do for the transitional era as the most definitive link of gaming's gamut from archaic to pro. This is one of two stores I did not want to leave behind that accommodated as a second home. Internet plays a major role in the downfall of retail, and at this point, I pity anyone who did not make themselves part of the experience, as there are no rare amount of feelings worse than knowing you could have done more. Only Mark could predict the need for GenX Games here through his own passion. And like that save file where you treasure the ultimate weapon you gained from childhood, GenX Games will remain in our psyche for all time. So now, I thank Mark for this cherished era we shared through GenX Games. This video is to your dedication.